morning. What's your name?
My name is Miriam Kirschenbaum Patipa.
And where were you born, Miriam?
I was born in Czechoslovakia. The place was called Dolho.
Okay, and when were you born?
May 15, 1927.
If you could tell me a little bit about your family, who your parents were.
My mother her name was Hannah Goldenberg. My father's name was Benjamin Kirschenbaum.
Okay, and what did your parents do for a living?
My mother was really a businesswoman. My father was involved with lumber.
And that was is that what most people did in your town?
Almost.
Okay, and how many siblings did you have, if you had any?
We were 9 children, 8 girls and 1 boy. My parents had a twin.
Right. What were their names?
Okay, the first one was Malka, married, Fixer. Second one was Aranka, Fleischer. The third one was my brother, Ignaz Kirschenbaum. Then came Blanca, Katz. Then came Shari, Krauthammer. Then was the twins, Margit Hatter and Pearl Markovich, and one more sister, Eva Kirschner, and then it was me.
So Miriam, if you could tell me a little bit about your daily life before the war started and before things started changing in your hometown.
Okay, I went to Czech school, kindergarten, and also to elementary school. In 1939, the Russians came in. The Czechs had to leave because the Russians occupied our place. So I went to Russian school, learning how to read and write. After that, in 1941, I went to Hungarian school because the Hungarian occupied our town.
If you could tell me a little bit about your friends.
Okay. I had Jewish friends, of course, who I was playing with all week long and going to school with them. On the weekends, I had Gentile friends, which was a very interesting thing.
And who were the Gentiles?
The Gentiles, we lived across the street with these friends' parents. The father was an important man. He was the mayor of town. He was a notar. He had 2 daughters. I played with them on the weekends. We were very close. My parents lived in the neighborhood. They were all Gentiles because that was close to the lumber yard where my father was involved with. Just so happens I have pictures from my friend. Her name is Miroslava Petrovska. She is in Sweden. her granddaughter visited me a few weeks ago. My granddaughter Leah made all these arrangements. She came and she wanted to meet me, which was very touchy. And I also spoke to her grandmother, who lives in Stockholm. Her sister, Tamara, who was older than me, she lived in Prague. What happened, she has a daughter, and I asked her, where is she? She said, she is in Toronto. Her name is Fisher. So I said, Fisher? That's a Jewish name. So her answer was to me, what can you do? It happened.
Very interesting. So tell me a little bit about your sisters or a sister. Did they get married before the war?
Yes, Malka got married before the war. In 1939, my sister Aranka, she was married. She lived in Moravia, Olomouc. They left on a ship to go to Israel.
Before the war?
1939.
Right.
When they got to Israel, they bombed that ship because there was still the English.
Who bombed the ship?
The English
English did?
people. And she drowned. She didn't know how to swim. Her husband survived, and luckily she held on to a boat and she survived.
She survived.
Then I had another sister. Her name was Shari Krauthammer. She was in Prague, and she met her husband there, and they got married.
Right.
Unfortunately, I lost her in the war.
So Miriam, if you could just tell me a little bit about how things started changing in your daily life at home.
Well, it did change a lot because, of course, anti-Semitism started, even though my mother had Gentile neighbors and friends. So one day, Christmas time, I went to my neighbor, to Mira and Tamara Petrovska, for Christmas night. They had a beautiful Christmas tree and also a lot of gifts under the Christmas tree. But when it came the time, it was like midnight, and Jesus supposedly flew in, they told me, you must go home. You're Jewish. You can't be here. Of course, I went home crying, and I said to my mom, how come I can't get gifts like they do? So my mother made sure to put a gift under their tree so I shouldn't feel locked out.
And before you were taken away to the ghetto, were your friends, did they leave the town?
They had to leave, the ones I talk about.
The Christian friends?
Because they were Czechs.
Right.
And all the Czechs had to leave because the Russians came in.
And you guys stayed?
Well, the Jewish people, we stayed until it was difficult, very difficult, because there was a curfew.
So you wouldn't be able to go outside your house after a certain time?
Yes, you couldn't be outside. Also, every Jew had to wear a yellow star.
Right.
Which I remember I wanted to have a very pretty yellow star.
Right. And one thing you told me previously to the interview is that your father began to get sick, and something due to the curfew, your uncle couldn't give medicine to your dad. If you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay. My father had the keys from our store because we had a store, and the Hungarians came and asked him to give up the keys.
Right.
And my father didn't do it. So he went and they kicked him in his stomach. Of course, he fainted. We called our cousin, who was a doctor, Dr. Engel, to come and see what's wrong. He said, take your father right away to Beraksas, to the hospital, because there was no hospital in our town. When he got to the hospital, they checked him, and of course they said, take him to Budapest, to the Jewish General Hospital. Now my 3 sisters, Blanca, Margit, and Pearl, was in Budapest. Of course, they opened up my father's stomach and sewed it up. They found out he had cancer.
In the stomach?
Stomach cancer, and it spread. So the doctor said, if you want to take home a live person, take him home right now. He doesn't have more than 2 weeks to live. But they did bring him home. My father was very sick. I recall we had 1 room in the house which was like for guests. So, of course, my father laid in that room and was in a lot of pain. So my mother's brother,
Your uncle?
my uncle, used to come every day to give him an injection, morphine, so he doesn't feel all that pain.
Right.
One day, when we had the curfew, he couldn't come. So he used to come through the fields. So
Through secrecy? So no one would find out? You'd hide?
the Hungarians, gendarmes, shouldn't see him.
Right.
But that wasn't for a long time.
Right.
So he tried to teach Blanca, my older sister, how to give the injection.
Very interesting.
After that, my father passed away in January 10, 1944.
Before the war started.
We were already in the
began.
war, but we couldn't put a headstone because the Hungarians were already after us.
Right.
In 1944, April 29th, after Passover, they gathered us. They said, all your belongings put into a big box, whatever, and deliver it to temple so it could be saved. But it wasn't so.
Right.
So that day in 1944, 29th, April 29th, they took us to a ghetto.
What ghetto?
They lined us all up at the station and took us to the ghetto, to Beraksas. That was a big city.
Where was that?
It was in Czechoslovakia. The name was Beraksas. It was a Jewish farm. We were there for 2 weeks and a few days.
Inside that ghetto?
In the ghetto. Of course, everybody was trying to find himself and to do. My mother managed Friday night always to bring food to the rabbi.
Right.
even in the ghetto.
Right. Could you tell me a little bit about what life was like inside the ghetto while you were there?
It was very bad. We slept on hay
Inside like a barn?
in the barn. Everybody one next to each other. My uncle, the doctor, he really took liking to me, and I recall he gave me a white band with a red cross.
Oh, so that you...
So I was like very excited.
Right.
I was just 15 years old.
Who was in the ghetto with you, family members?
Okay, my mother, my older sister Malka, and her son, who was just bar mitzvah, was 13 years old. Also, my sister Eva and my brother's wife. Her name was Hannah. She had a little boy who was there also.
How old was he?
He was about 3 years old or so.
So at the end of your time in the ghetto, they began to round you up and take you to a concentration camp?
On May 15, 1944, on my birthday.
What birthday was that? How old were you?
15. They they came early in the morning, and the Hungarian gendarmes, they came and they said, everybody get ready, we are leaving.
Did you know where you were going?
No, we are leaving. You could take only what you could wear, because you had to leave everything. And when we went into cattle trains, when we got into the cattle trains,
Were they packed?
100 people, no water, no toilets. Everybody was just like one on top of the other.
Right. How many days were you in the cattle car for?
3 days and 2 nights. I recall my mother had a black fur coat, and she wouldn't take that off because they said you could only keep what you have on yourself. I will never forget that.
Did you, I believe you previously told me about your mom. She had jewelry on.
This was when when we arrived to Auschwitz.
So for after the time you were on the cattle car, you finally arrived at one of the concentration camps, if you could tell me where.
When we were in the cattle car for all this long time, my mother said, you know, children, it's not going to be that bad. I will stay home and cook and clean, and you will go to work. He had no idea where we are going. He had no idea what it's like. Of course, for some reason, people didn't know.
Right.
We didn't know that there is a place, Auschwitz, where they kill people. So when we got to Auschwitz, they started to unload us. And what we saw was people in striped clothes.
Right.
With music.
They were playing music.
Music. It was like a concert place. They played music. Again, he had no idea where we are, what's happening. Only when we already stood in the line, I saw that there were people sent to the right and to the left.
And who was doing this?
Dr. Mengele. He selected who should live and who should die.
Right.
When it came to me, I held on to my mother. I saw that cripples, sickly-looking kids were going with their mothers. Just so happened, my sister, my older sister, Malka, she took a kerchief from me and put it on her son, Zoli. He should look like a girl,
Right.
because his father wasn't there. And this is how she got killed with
Right.
her boy. When it came to me, Dr. Mengele, which I remember him clearly,
Right.
he looked at me. I stood like with my shoulder down, and he hit me on my shoulder, and I straightened out, and he said, "How old are you?" And I said, 15. And he says, 15? I said, no, I just became 16. He says, stram genug,
Is that in what language?
strong enough. And he pushed me to the left and my mother to the right. And my mother was walking about 3 feet and turned around to Eva,
Your sister?
to my sister Eva, who was in the line with me, and she says, take care of the child. I was the youngest.
Right.
I was always the child, always the baby. Out of 9, I was the youngest.
Right.
So we walked on a field, which was pretty far away, and they told us, they gave us a needle and thread, and we were told by the Nazi that to put everything down and sew your initials, because we will walk away, and when we come back, we should be able to find it.
Right. And when
But
your
it was a lie.
right. When your mom said that to your sister Eva, was that the last time you saw your mom?
Yes, this
That
was
was
the
the
last time I heard my mom and saw my mom.
Were you nervous at the time?
Why?
Nervous or emotional?
I cried.
Right.
I wanted to go with my mother.
Right.
I didn't know where she's going.
Right.
I found out later on.
Why they didn't tattoo you? Why the Nazis didn't do that to you?
You mean why they didn't give me a number
Right.
and tattoo it? Because we were the last transport
That was the last transport into Auschwitz?
to Auschwitz.
Right.
And they didn't think they want to let us live.
There was no reason to.
So they just let us go.
Right. If you could tell me now just a little bit about what they did next to you. What was the
Okay,
next thing?
it was already very late.
At night?
No, in the afternoon, late, even though we arrived early morning. They finally, they took us, marched us into this ice-cold hallway,
Right.
and there were benches, and we were told that put everything down. All you should keep is a comb and shoes.
Right.
When the time came for them to take us in to shave us in another hall,
Right.
they took away the comb and the shoes, which I understand there are now on display a lot of shoes from baby. Now, when we stood in the line,
Inside that hallway?
inside that long hall, we saw I saw people were being shaved their heads everywhere. I was one between all these people that a Nazi walked by and chose me to go to a site.
Right.
There was like 24 girls. I still had my hair.
They didn't shave you at this point.
Huh?
They didn't shave you at this point.
Still did not shave. And they started to solicit. Out of the 24, there remained about 12. Luckily, they let me go back into the line with a dog, German Shepherd, jumping on you and smelling you.
Right.
I saw my sister Eva was ahead. She was shaved, and on one side they left her some hair, which was for me very good because we didn't recognize each other.
Everyone looked the same?
Huh?
Everyone looked the same?
Shaved. I mean, how could you recognize one who has beautiful long hair and all of a sudden there is nothing? So this girl shaved me too, from one side and other side, as I said, everywhere. We started to walk, and a woman who was there, like a, they called it Aufsicht, like she was counting us and everything, said, listen, if you get a piece of soap in your hands, you're not gonna live.
Right.
If you don't, you will live. Finally, when we got to the shower, there were showers.
There were shower heads?
Shower heads. And some of them went to the left, we went to the right. And when we got in, we heard screaming.
Were they women and children
screaming from next place.
The room over.
They were letting gas on these people. They gassed them, and unfortunately, we heard it. We got out from the shower, and they lined us up to get a shirt, a gray shirt with a number sewed on.
Right.
And I got out. I was looking for my sister Eva, and there were a lot of people from Dorho, older women, because they gave up their children.
Right.
They looked at me and they said, oh my God, this is you, the pretty Marischka? I didn't see myself.
Right.
So Eva looked at me and she started to laugh. She says, you don't look the same. Mm-hmm. I says, you don't look the same either. I says, if I want you to be with me, I'm just gonna pull your few hair so you should know it's me. Again, they lined us up and they walked us from Auschwitz to Birkenau,
right,
barefoot and at night.
Right.
When we got to Birkenau, we were put in barrack number 19.
You still remember?
I remember my sister's son, Benny, went with his wife to Auschwitz, and she made a picture from that barrack, number 19, which I have.
Right.
We were there. There were like 3 lines.
3 rows of barracks?
3 lines, rows where you sleep.
Right.
We were in the middle. There was on the bottom, there was on top.
Right.
Everybody tried to make, we got a gray, cover. a gray blanket. Everybody was trying to make themselves,
Room.
acceptable.
Right.
I got out and I saw there a girl who was also a captured from Poland. Her name was Bella. She was taken before me from Poland. People were taken earlier. And I walked up to her. She looked at me, she says, "What do you want?" I says, "Could you tell me where am I going to see my mother?" So she said, "You want to see your mother? Okay, come, I'll show you." She walked me to the entrance and she says, "Look, do you see these chimneys there?" I says, "Yes." She says, "Do you smell the smoke?" I says, "Yes." She says, "This is where your mother is burning now."
That's horrible.
It was terrible. Of course, I started to cry. And I went back and I told Eva what happened. When we were there for the few months, every morning we had to go and be counted. That was called Zählerpell, 5 in the row. And if one was missing, we stayed there in the line. Then the sirens went on.
Right. How long would you stand in that line for if someone was missing?
They knew that there wasn't standing in the line 5, 5, 5. So the siren went on. And until they found that person who was missing, they wouldn't let you go. We used to stand hours and hours.
Right. Just standing there.
It was in May. The sun was hitting you.
If you could just tell me a little bit about the food that they gave you.
Okay. We would go to stand the line by the kitchen where they gave us so-called soup. But it wasn't. It was really just like water. One day, I was standing in line and getting the soup, and as I was eating, I felt something heavy on my spoon. There were gold teeth.
There was someone's gold teeth?
So, of course, I got sick seeing that. I couldn't eat it.
Right.
A lot of people said that the Nazis emptied out the pockets from the people, and this is the way they made the soup.
Right.
A lot of people put it into cookies or so there it belonged. After a few months, again, we were lined up and they started to solicit us. My sister Eva was put into one line and me in the other line. They separated us. I wound up in number 20 and she was back in number 19 in the barracks.
Right.
There were two sisters. One was a younger girl and one was older. So Eva made up with her to exchange so we could be back together.
Change spots?
What?
Exchange spots in line?
No. She should go, when we stay in the line, she should go into the line where her sister is,
Right.
and I would go in the line where Eva is,
Right.
which it happened. After that, they took us to Germany. We in a regular train. We went to Gelsenkirchen, Gelsenburg. There was an oil refinery to work there because the English bombed that oil refinery.
Right.
So we were chosen to go and rebuild it, which we did. They made again a concentration camp for us
At the factory? At the oil refinery?
at Gelsenkirchen, and I mean further from the oil refinery.
Right.
We started to work there. It was terrible, terrible experience. I was even taken down into a bunker and I saw there what's going on, dark. As soon as it finished, we finished,
Right.
we were walking back to the camp, and I made up with Eva that she should go and wash my so-called dress.
Yeah.
So I remained, just covered myself with the gray blanket. As soon as we got there to the camp, the place, the city got black. The sirens went on, and they bombed it again.
They bombed the factory, the oil refinery.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And we were running. We didn't know what's going on.
Right.
Eva remained in the washroom.
Oh.
She never got out.
Right.
As we were running, I don't know, the English or the Americans, whoever bombed it, they started to throw hand grenades
At you guys?
at us. They didn't notice we are, from the concentration camp. I recall that from the big impact, I got buried into the ground. My friend, who I was friends with at home in Czechoslovakia, was next to me. And when we picked our heads up, I saw she was bleeding, and I saw her teeth. And I said to her, Rachel, you're bleeding. What happened? Did you go through the wires? She says, no. She says, yeah, I feel something wet. Some people came right away and took her away. They took her to a hospital and sewed her up. Eva found me and started to touch me everywhere if I'm not hurt.
Right.
And sat me down. And she says, okay, you stay here. I have to go and help the people who got hurt. I think out of the 600, maybe 300 or so were alive. The rest was killed.
That's crazy.
A lot of them lost their hands, a lot of them the leg, because the hand grenade did it. We all cleaned ourselves up and went into our barrack. After that, they, of course, after that, what the Nazis did, they took us away from Gelsenkirchen, Gelsenburg. Okay, after the bombing, they cleaned up everything. There was one Nazi woman who somehow she did like me, but you couldn't trust them. She chose me to go and clean up their bunker,
Right.
their place. Here is the picture where I am cleaning up the place, and there is Eva.
You? Is that you?
This is me, and this is Eva watching a Nazi shouldn't come by. This guy said to me, he didn't speak Czech or Hungarian, he just said, Ich Muriš, you Mariška, alle zwei. He wanted me to go over the border with him, and he would hide me.
Oh, wow.
Because this is where he lived. And I said, I can't go without my sister. Where he said, well, he can't take my sister too. Okay. After leaving Gelsenkirchen, Gelsenburg, they took us to Sommerda. There was a hand grenade factory. We stayed there, and I saw an older lady sitting and praying. Her name was Mrs. Goldstein. I walked up to her and I said, can I pray with you? And she says, yes. I says, could you lend me the prayer book? She brought that prayer book under her bosom to Auschwitz, and she was capable of saving it. So I said, can I pray with you? She says, yes. I says, could you please lend me the book, that prayer book? I would like to copy some prayers. And she says, the only way, if you sit right here, you could do it. We had night shift and day shift. When everybody was sleeping, I found paper. I saw that in a office paper. And I ran in, I took the paper, and I took a piece of cardboard, and I made myself a so-called a book. I started to write the prayers, which are right here. I started to write poems, which I put together. I did put together a poem. I'm going to read it to you. I'm so sad, and I sit here all alone. My mother, my sisters, and brother are taken so far from me. If I could only one more time be so lucky, and with my mother and sisters and brother be together again. But destiny does not bring me that happiness, because the time still does not ever come. My only dear mother, when will you yet come to take me in your arms, kiss me, and bestow your great love on me? I translated that from Czech. When I finished writing this book, I took cardboard. I found cardboard and I made covers. And I painted these covers with hand grenade paint, which you could see. It was blue. And it became a very famous book because somebody heard about it. And the museum in Washington, Holocaust Museum, I got letters if I would like to give up this book.
And did you?
Where we flew up to Washington with my kids, and they saw the book and they wanted me to give it up right away, which I couldn't part with it. So I did lend it to them for 3 years. They wanted to keep it and show what a 16-year-old girl went through and yet wrote prayers. I kept this book. We walked 6 weeks, that walk. At that time, I was so upset that I wouldn't be able to keep it, but I managed to keep it.
Where did you keep it? Did you just
Carried
hold
it with me.
Huh.
Okay. Now, I'm jumping from one thing to another. After the 3 years, when I received a letter from the Holocaust Museum from this gentleman saying that if I don't want to give up the book, I have to pick it up because the paper would crumble. Here is a picture when I'm giving up the book and crying. The only way I did give it to them, if I told them, if you make me 10 covers, 10 copies, so I could give it to my kids, to my grandchildren. And of course, they did. But as you could see, that the copies are smaller, half size, than the original, what I gave them.
So the book is in the Holocaust Museum in Washington?
The book is in the Holocaust Museum in Washington. Now, my family was in Washington and they wanted to see it. So they were told that they need 2 weeks before they requested it because they're traveling with it. And of course, my kids couldn't see it. But I do know they wrote me that they really appreciate what they could show from a Holocaust survivor of 16 years to give it up. Okay, we were walking for 6 weeks, 40 kilometers a day, and from one place to another until we reached always a German farm. We stayed there overnight.
Was this during the winter?
Hmm?
Was the walk during the winter?
No, in the summer. There it tells you in March.
Right.
Okay. As we reached a farm, we always stayed there overnight. One day, we stayed in the line and we were talking Czech, and a man walked by and said, "Who are you girls?" He was Slovak. He was there on hard labor. So I told him that we are from the concentration camp. And he said, "You must be crazy letting yourself be so treated, punished." So I said, "What can we do?" He said, "You come out here when you will be counted in the evening, or go on the toilet, so-called toilet, where the horses were making. He says, and I'm going to tell you what you should do. I said, okay. He did. Here I was sitting on the ground making. He said to me, what I want you to do in the morning, when everybody's going to leave, you go up on the attic.
Of what? Of the barn?
In the barn. And cover yourself. So I'm going to come and whistle. And then you know it's me. You must be very careful not to show yourself to another person, because there was one guy who worked for the Germans. He was a Russian.
He was a spy?
No, he worked. He says, if he should find you, you would be in trouble. I said, okay. I said, but I have a problem. I have a sister. He said, that's okay. You could take your sister too. I said, but I have 2 more friends who also want to be with me. He says, 4? I said, yeah. He says, okay. And he left. When it came to line us up
In the morning?
to go, to leave, we went up in the attic and covered ourselves up.
All 4 of you?
Or 4 of us. This was the 3rd time we managed to run away, but 2 times they caught us. Of course, they beat us up. We hid between the rest of them because we were afraid that they're going to kill us. About when they left, we heard shooting downstairs. There was a girl, she came from the same town I did, pretty girl. She ran into the German house and she asked bread. Of course they gave her bread, but there was a Nazi who was the worst. He walked out after her and he said to her, bite on it. And she did, and he shot her and killed her and left her laying right there. When we heard that shooting, we were really very scared. There is a story with my sister. She saw dried potatoes and she just couldn't wait, and she walked up there and wanted to take the potatoes, and this Russian guy came.
When was this?
When we were walking the dead walk. And this Russian said to her, who are you? And she said, I'm from the group. And he says, okay, lay down, in Russian. And she said, no, don't do that. I have syphilis. So he looked at her and he says, okay, just go. When he left, she came to lay down and cover herself up. We beat her up so bad because he told her, don't go, but she always managed somehow to get food.
Right.
Next day came this boy. His name was Yanda. And I hear the whistle. He was standing on the ladder. And I opened up and he says, oh my God, here you are in Czech. Here you are, my little bird. So he came up and he said, listen, just stay here. I'm gonna come tonight. I'm gonna take you downstairs and take you over a high wall with my brother-in-law to go on the attic where he lives, which was right there. And we did. We went on that attic, he brought us food, and everything was much better than to walk the dead walk. My sister Eva and the friend Olga, they got up early in the morning, he was still sleeping, and they took our clothes. My friend's name was Vlasta and myself, and hid it. And they walked away because they heard this war is over.
Right.
As they left, we were there laying and crying. So he came up and he says, "What happened?" And I told him this and that. He says, "Okay, just keep quiet, wait. I'm gonna take the buggy with the horse and I'm gonna go and get somebody to come and liberate you."
Right.
Which he did. But in the meantime, Eva and Olga came back and they said, we are free, let's go.
Right.
And we did. The sister-in-law saw us from Yenda, saw us leaving, and she says, "Don't do that. Yenda is bringing some, he'll be very upset. He saved you for himself."
Right.
I didn't tell him nothing. Of course, it was not my religion, and I was brought up very religious. And we just walked away. And as we were walking, we saw German people standing on the curb with suitcases, and they looked at us. They said, "Who are these people? They look like they're wild people."
Right.
And we said, "No, we are real people." We walked and reached a house where there was a German woman living. We walked in there, and she was very scared, but she let us stay, and she says, "You want food? You want food?" She gave us food. Even outside there was a pound, water. Of course, we took off all our gray shirts.
Right.
Here I still kept my prayer book and washed it in that pond. Saw this man driving up with a motorcycle, and he said, "Who are you girls?" Here we were just covering ourselves with the blankets. And we told him. He said, "Put on your clothes. There are Russian soldiers, and they're going to come and they're going to attack you." The name of this man was Yarda Saforek. That's his picture.
That's the guy?
That's the person, yes.
And he liberated you?
Huh?
He liberated you?
Yes. He said, "You stay here, dressed. I'm going to come back." He came back with a car. And of course he put us into the car. Here, the four of us were sitting in the back. Of course, I was sitting on the girl's lap. I started to jump, and I said, "We are in a car, we are in a car."
That was your first time?
After a year, not to see a door, and I looked in the mirror, and I saw him crying, wiping his eyes.
Right.
I didn't realize that he could see me jumping there. So of course I pulled back. He brought us to a city, it was called Žihle,
Where was that?
in Czechoslovakia already. And he took us to the person who was in charge, the city, and he explained who we are. he said, you stay here. They gave us food. And I remember walking into his house. He was like the mayor of the city. I couldn't believe I'm opening a door. It
Right.
was still in my mind how it was. He went away and he brought us clothes. My size shoe was men's number 9. She was swollen.
Right.
So once he brought us clothes, went back into the car, and he took us another city, Kralovice.
That's in Czechoslovakia?
Everything was in Czechoslovakia already. There where we settled down, he found us a place where to live.
Right.
And he brought me more clothes and food, chocolate. And I asked him, how come you're treating me so better than the rest of the girls? And he said, there is a story. One day I'll tell you. He wouldn't tell me. But what he did want me to do is to go with him on the motorcycle to Karlove Vary.
What's that?
That was a place, very big city. That was called Carlsbad. People were going there for rehab.
Right.
He says, I want to take you there, and I'm going to buy you anything you want. And I said, I don't want to go by myself.
Right.
And Olga, the older one, said, go, go. She started to hit me. Go. He's gonna bring us stuff. I says, I'm not going by myself unless Vlasta is coming with me. He said, no, only you.
And did you go?
I didn't go. I was afraid.
Right.
I was still a little girl.
How old were you at this time? 17?
16. After that, my sister, Eva and Olga went to Budapest to find who is alive.
Right.
And Eva found Blanca.
Right.
And she told her, what's happening. Because every day they were going to the station, to the train station to see if we're coming. And they said, nobody knows whatever happened to me and Eva. Once Eva went there, of course, it was a reunion. They went home to Dolho from Budapest.
And where were you at this time?
I was still in Kralovice.
Right.
They went home. Unfortunately, I was never back.
Right.
They didn't want me to go. They still babied me in a way. So I did tell Eva, if you go home, in the cellar, there is a wall. There are, stones. Pull out this stone. You'll find my mother and myself. We put in their jewelry.
Really?
And she did, and she found it.
Oh, wow.
So there was a gold watch from my father, and my mother had a big gold chain, which was like every married woman would get that when she gets married.
Right.
And my mother's ring,
Right.
marriage ring. Also, there were some things of mine what I got. Anyway.
So who survived? Who survived the concentration camps of your family?
6 of us.
Who?
So when they came back to Czechoslovakia, Yarda came.
Your sister?
Blanca came back with Eva.
Right.
Olga found a man who was engaged to my sister, brother-in-law's sister, but she got killed.
Wow.
She found him. He married her. When they came back and they found this jewelry, I said, okay, let's divide it.
Right.
Eva took the watch. I took my mother's ring. The rest of them cut up the
necklace?
The chain, the gold chain. Everybody lost everything.
Wow.
Only I remained holding on to my mother's ring, which I still have.
Really?
Now, when Yarda came, he wanted to take me to a movie. And when he saw Blanca, beautiful woman with blonde hair, he sure pulled back. And he said, okay, girls, now you don't need me anymore.
Right.
I'm gonna leave. I said, please don't leave. He said to me, you sister, what he did is take the four of us to a doctor to check us,
Right.
which he did. I was checked by this doctor, I'll never forget it. And of course, he checked everywhere. Once he came to me and he wanted to check me on the bottom, and I started to scream. And he says, why are you screaming? Didn't the Germans abuse you?
Right.
Didn't you have sex? I said, no. He says, oh, so you're a virgin. Here I was such a naive little girl.
Right.
Okay.
And
so when we went to the doctor and they decided who is going to work where, the three girls were chosen to go and count eggs in a farm.
Right.
Me, he put into work in an office.
Right.
Oh my God, I was so proud of myself. I still have the book, the workbook, from these offices where I worked. This is the workbook where I worked in the office. Meantime, I did meet my husband,
What was his name?
Eugene Patipa. I went out with him, it's a whole story, but I went out with him for 6 weeks and he never kissed me.
Mm-hmm. Was he in the concentration camps too?
Yeah, he was in Mauthausen and he came out very sick after liberation. He had flak typhus.
So after you lived in Czechoslovakia, after the war, where did you go?
Well, we lived in Czechoslovakia in 1940. We got married in 1947 with Eugene. In 1948, end of 48, my husband signed up with the Jewish group to go and be trained to go to Israel with the Haganah.
The army, Israeli army?
In the army. 1948, somewhere in December, we did leave.
And you went to Israel?
We went to Israel. Meantime, I got pregnant with my oldest son, Michael. In 1940, we were in the Beit Olim. After that,
In Israel?
in Hadera in Israel. In 1949, when we got to Israel, of course, they wanted to take me also to go to the army, but I was pregnant, so they didn't.
Right.
1949 in July, Michael was born.
Right.
And we were there. It was a very, very, very hard time. We got like 45 deco chicken a week. No food, everything was still, the war was still on. Everything was on coupons.
The rations. Rations.
Yeah. 1951, we left Israel.
Where'd you go?
We went to Canada. My husband Eugene had a brother in Canada and a sister in New York. So we went there.
Into Canada?
Huh?
In Canada?
To Canada. But it was a very hard thing because when we got to Italy to get our
passport?
To get our visa, we had already the visa, but to get approved. So Eugene was chosen right away. Me, no. I was so sickly looking.
Right.
They said they're going to send us on a farm.
In Canada?
In Canada. No, in Italy.
Oh, in Italy.
So we were there for 6 weeks.
Right.
And of course I got fattened up and we left to Canada. We came to Canada.
Where in Canada?
Montreal. But when we came to Newfoundland, again, to check the passports, I was very sick and I had the little baby there. He wasn't even 2 years old. And he ran away. When Eugene came, he says, "Where is the baby? Where is Michael?" I said, "I thought he's with you."
Oh,
And
wow.
we started to look for him. Somebody kidnapped him because he was always running. Everybody was looking for him. Everybody. The flight was gonna take off in a half hour. In the bathrooms, through the whole airport, Eugene heard crying, and he followed that voice. And good enough, Michael was put in a car on the street already.
Right.
And a little bit the window was open. He had a chewing gum in his hands and crying. So of course Eugene found him. There were 2 men, he said, sitting in the restaurant by a window and watching.
Oh.
And Eugene got him back. And this is how we left to Montreal.
Right.
This is where life began, the reality. Anyway, what a...
Did you have any other kids?
Yes. When we were in Montreal, there was a man who knew us from Czechoslovakia, and he approached Eugene, we should go with him into business to open up a dry goods store, which we did. Little did I know how and what. So we closed the store, and I got pregnant with Bobby, which he was born in 1955. Very gorgeous little boy.
And how long did you
And
live there
here
after
we
that?
are.
How long did you live there after that, after Bobby was born?
Until 55. We left Canada to Florida in 1955.
Right.
3 months later, when he was born. Since then, Michael and Bobby got married, and both of them brought me two grandchildren. Michael had 2 daughters, Leah and Lizzie, where Bobby had a daughter and son, Morgan and Ryan. Ryan is the one who's interviewing me, and there is no bigger pleasure than to look at his face.
Thank you.
And enjoy.
Thank you, Mima, for telling me about your past during the Holocaust. It was very interesting learning all the stories that you had to tell.